Is Emancipation Will Smith's best movie since he played Oscar in Shark Tale? Let's talk about it. What is up, Flick fans? Welcome back to my channel. Emancipation is a brand new movie coming to Apple TV Plus this weekend. It's also in limited theaters, starring Will Smith, directed by Antoine Fuqua. Is this an Oscar movie? Let's talk about it. A runaway slave forges through the swamps of Louisiana on a torturous journey to escape plantation owners that nearly killed him. This movie is rated R for strong racial violence, disturbing images, and language. It's not a movie you want to watch with your family. It's not a movie you want to watch with younger kids, just because some of the imagery is jarring and scarring for a lot of people, understandably so. And if you go watch Will Smith in interviews, he talks about how this isn't your typical and standard movie revolving around slavery. It's more about hope and the light that you see at the end of the tunnel, because we're dealing with someone here who is running from his slave owners after hearing tale that Lincoln has indeed freed the slaves. Is that true? Are these just false rumblings? Regardless, he commits to the fact that he can get away and find a better place for not only himself, but for his family, who he leaves behind, not necessarily his fault. And I know a lot of you all have seen a very famous historical photograph taken of this character that we're dealing with here. The photograph is known as Whipped Peter, or the Scourged Back. It is a jarring, real picture taken, so I'm not going to show it in this video. You can find it if you research it. And we also get the scene in the film, of course, where the picture is taken. And the man that is on display here, played by Will Smith, and I'm not entirely sure how many creative liberties were taken, I'm sure there were some, is one that so many people can look at in a hopeful and inspirational way. A man who tried his very best, did everything he could to escape this madness and this horrifying situation that he was in. Peter is a fighter. Emotionally, physically. There's one point in the film where someone kind of calls him out for not being a fighter, and he goes through a list of things telling him, hey, here's what I have done, consistently fighting back. No matter how many times I was brought down, I mean all the way down, lower than low, I would always claw my way out or fight back regardless. And that's very important to this character, but at the same time, you look at the actions of Peter here and what he does, and I guess there is a bit of plot armor surrounding him. You look at what he does compared to some of the other slaves in the movie, they are treated more harshly, some of them killed along the way, yet our character is played by Will Smith, and that's not a detriment to Will Smith. It's more so the script that is so full of cliches and conventions within a movie like this that we're often getting around awards season. And don't get me wrong, I've seen a lot of great movies. I mean, 12 Years a Slave, to me, was one of the better films of that year. Not a movie I ever want to go back and revisit because it's a difficult watch. And I feel that way about Emancipation because there's nothing kind of within the film to lift it out of being a hard watch, a brutal watch, other than paying close attention to the style of it all, if you're a fan of Fuqua as a director, or the performance from Will Smith. You also have Ben Foster in there and some other really talented supporting actors. I couldn't really find a performance besides Smith that stuck out to me. I mean, even Foster, right? We know how good he is. The guy has been Oscar-worthy multiple times throughout his career, but he didn't bring anything to this character that couldn't have been brought by really any actor playing that part. He is a very conventional slave owner, very conventional character that gets a monologue or two that was great, but I couldn't find anything within any of the characters outside of Smith's Peter. Thankfully, that's the focus. He gets his own Revenant-style storyline combined with other similar types of movies that we've seen before. I say Revenant because when he's on this journey trying to escape from this wild situation, we see his trials and tribulations, and Smith's not even having to talk throughout a lot of this, right? Limited dialogue with this character, but when we get the dialogue, it's really well done. Let's talk about Will Smith, because there's the thing that everybody's going to be talking about. It's the thing. You know the thing. The slap. It's been talked about 1,000 times. What more is there to say, right? There's nothing I could say now that's going to change your mind on how you feel about the situation. This is Will Smith's comeback movie, if you will. You don't have to watch this movie. I understand a lot of people don't want to for good reason, but at the same time, I'm trying my best to separate everything that went on there from Will Smith and his performance in this movie, because that's what I'm judging. And if I'm looking at his performance and I'm seeing some reviews saying, oh, it all falls on the shoulder of Will Smith, he was not very good in this film, I'm thinking to myself, what movie were you watching? I get the fact that you could look at the character of Peter and say, well, I can't see past it being Will Smith. That's a valid criticism, because the personality of Will Smith as an actor, sometimes you get an actor that big, all you can see is that actor regardless of how good the performance is. I understand that. I think that's a very valid criticism. But if we're looking at this performance and the emotions that he has to convey and the subtle moments as well as the bigger and more grand moments where he's having to show emotion, just getting specific with you, there's a scene I referenced earlier where he's having to say all of the things that he had to do and it ends on such a great amount of emotion, and I look at that and I say, this is some of the best acting of Will Smith's career. I've always looked at Will Smith as a good actor, but I think over the last few years, he's taken that next step and he has become a fantastic actor. And regardless of what you think about this film, I do believe that this is one of his best performances ever. Is he going to get an Oscar nomination? No. No, because if people looked at Adam Sandler's performance in Uncut Gems and said, well, he's too funny, and didn't nominate him, come on. Just being real with you, it's human nature. Some people, and I'm not saying everyone, and I try my best not to, but some people will take those things into account, and then they'll say that they're not. But I look at Will Smith's performance here, and I say, especially in a weaker year when it comes to Best Actor, and I could see this performance warranting a nomination, trying my best to look past the fact that this is somewhat of an Oscar baity type film, because it absolutely is. But even then, he's still really freaking good in the movie. So just looking at the performance, he's spectacular here. But then I come back to the movie itself and the fact that it feels so similar to other films in this vein. And even though this journey, it's a combination of movies like The Revenant. And funny enough, I could actually draw a comparison to 1917, because we get two 1917 moments here. It's an individual journey like our main character in that movie, and it even ends with a handful of war scenes that are very well filmed. But those war scenes somewhat feel similar to war scenes we've seen over the past few years. So movie references galore in this film, and a journey that we have seen many, many times before. It's also a movie that's just really difficult to watch, and I understand Fuqua including some of these scenes, but at the same time, there were moments that I felt were unnecessary. We're talking, crocodiles ripping into people, dogs biting down on these slaves, their arms and their legs, and to me, sometimes less is more. But the mindset of this movie at points seems to be more is more. We're going to show as many brutal things as we can, and to me, I've just seen this happen over and over again in movies, and I could understand seeing this through the perspective of certain viewers and just having enough of it. So it is a hard tightrope to walk as a film. I also felt like the story itself was a bit repetitive, and because it's repetitive and we're seeing very similar moments over and over, that does make for kind of a pacing issue. And looking at it on a technical level, I do think the cinematography is really good. I like some of the close-ups with the camera, the color grading, the color correction, very distinct style. Understand why you want to do it. I do think the themes give this movie a bleak feeling, make for a bleak watch, but I don't know if you had to do that as much as they did visually. The color grading, I wasn't a huge fan of the look of this movie. It felt like they went overboard with that. Before I give you my score, the best way to support this video is by dropping a thumbs up down below, and today's phrase of the day to comment and confuse other people is Shark Tale is GOAT. Emancipation provides Smith an opportunity to showcase what he is made of as an actor, and he does not disappoint. The journey itself is familiar, lengthy, and somewhat repetitive while providing a heartbreaking and brutal look into this time period. My score, though, is a 62%. Again, I think this gets some things right, but it also just takes moments and elements a bit too far and does not fully provide Will Smith the vehicle, even though I think his performance is Great. So if those are my thoughts on Emancipation, watch it on Apple TV Plus this weekend or don't. I don't care.